Well, our technology editor, Peter Marks, has been looking at what's on offer from both parties. Peter, good morning.
Good morning, Fran.
Peter, we now have two different broadband plans using two different technologies. Can you give us a snapshot of what both parties are pledging?
Well, the government's National Broadband Network, the NBN Company Limited, has a budget of $43 billion to spend over 8 years to fund the rollout and operations of their network, which is to deliver fibre optic cable to premises. Now, I think it's around, I think that they've been upping the numbers, but it's up to 97% of premises actually getting 100 megabits per second speed over fibre. The remaining few percent, people who are well outside coverage areas, will get wireless and satellite technology. On the other hand, the Coalition's broadband policy announced yesterday will cost just $6.3 billion over 7 years, much lower expenditure, and it's to be funded both by government and some private investment. Not quite sure how that's going to work, but I guess they'll sell some sort of bonds or something. And it focuses on building an optical backbone. That's a $2.75 billion expenditure. And then it focuses on delivery only to premises in the bush and in the outer suburbs. So they're leaving the cities, the central business districts and the inner suburbs to the normal telcos to serve.
Okay, now there's clear differences. I mean, one's a lot cheaper and quicker to roll out too, but one is fibre optic to the home, which is, I think we've discussed that before. It's almost roll gold. But the other is something less than that. It doesn't matter if we don't go for the gold standard. It doesn't matter so long as everyone has coverage.
Well, look, the Coalition's policy leverages current technologies, old technologies. They're using HFC, which is hybrid fibre cable, which is that normally gets delivered as coaxial cable, internet, and DSL, which is the high-speed broadband which has been delivered over copper wire, the old copper wire infrastructure.
So we're still using the copper wire?
Well, that's what we use now if you either have cable or you have copper wire. And it also proposes to use some fixed wireless technology, which is an emerging technology. It doesn't address the problem which we've had of fair commercial access to the wiring. The last mile, the wire that goes into people's houses, has been owned and controlled by Telstra. Now, you'll remember that only last month, Telstra was fined $18.5 million in the federal court for refusing to give broadband competitors access to the exchange. And anyone who's got DSL connected to their house by someone other than Telstra often has a frustrating time because they'll say, we've got to wait for Telstra to clip the wires together, and that can often take days. And Telstra, honestly, is not terribly helpful to their competitors. That's their track record. So why that attitude would change? And of course, don't forget...
And this is relying on the private providers to do this themselves, isn't it? With some government grant money and support money.
Well, that's right. And the Coalition is basically leaving that part of it untouched. Now, remember the history of the NBN. The NBN was only formed after the Labor government went to a market to get bids, quotes on actually building the network, and Telstra was what you could only describe as arrogant. They put in about a 2-page bid that was a non-bid, and it was only really in desperation because of their lack of willingness to play in the free market that they had to set up the NBN.
What about if the Coalition's plan did work, though, if the private providers came and a large proportion of it is dependent on wireless technology? Andrew Robb, we heard there talking about the surging popularity of wireless, and that is true. It is incredibly popular. Is it as good or reliable, if you like, as fibre to the home in terms of speed and reliability?
Absolutely not. Now, as I said, copper...
Could it ever be?
Well, there are new technologies, and we're just on the cusp of a new wireless technology called LTE, which stands for long-term evolution. Optus just tested that last month, and it can deliver great peak download speeds to mobile phones and things. But what the opposition is talking about is fixed wireless, that is, using wireless rather than wires or optical fibres into people's homes. Now, the problem with wireless is that it shares its spectrum with all of the other users. So if you're in a dense area and a lot of people are using it, then everyone's connection gets downgraded. It also has problems with noise and interference. As you said, the rolled gold standard is optical fibre. Copper has had a fantastic life. That old copper wire that runs into people's houses, it's amazing the DSL speeds that we can get over it, but it does have problems. It runs much slower as you get further from the exchange, and it degrades. Wireless, I think, has similar problems. Fibre, of course, is at the beginning of a technological run, and we can only see that fibre is going to improve in speed over the years ahead.
How much of an issue is speed? Because the Coalition points out that, the government's NBN plan aims for 100 megabits per speed a second for every home it goes to. The Coalition points out that a lot of people don't need that speed, don't want to pay for it. I mean, that's true, isn't it? Do we need that speed?
I feel the need for speed. There's a lot of applications.
But you're a tech head, as Tony Abbott
Unlike
might describe
Tony,
you.
yeah, that's right. Look, I think that speed is one of those things that if you don't have it, you don't realise that you want it. I mean, when you use the internet and you go to a page and it goes bam and it's there, then you tend to use it more. And I mean, people who want more people to use the internet, such as Google, are all about speed. At the moment, Google is running a trial in the US where they're demonstrating speeds of up to 1 gigabit, so it's 10 times the 100 megabit. They're pushing the FCC in the US to start experimenting with gigabit delivery over fibre to houses. Yet they announced in February that they'd offer a competitive service, so they'd actually be an ISP, to between 50 and 500,000 people as a trial. And by the time our rollout is complete at 100 megabit, then no doubt we'll be talking gigabit as the next step.
Well, that's one of the points the Coalition is making, that the NBN rollout, the fibre optic to the home, is going to take 8 years. By then, technology is moving at such a pace, it could be an outmoded technology already, with a massive roll of the dice. I mean, $43 billion.
Yeah, but optical fibre is a technology at the beginning of its curve, whereas copper and wireless, or maybe not wireless, but copper is certainly on the end of its curve. We've pushed copper as far as we can. Optical is the next step, and that will be upgradable as it goes ahead. I mean, you're talking about 8 years, but the Coalition's plan is actually 7 years, so it's not a great deal of difference. And whatever happens, we know the technology will change. But you've got to look at what is the role of government in society in a free market. Obviously, you want government to set up an environment where there's competition, but we do look
You want to leverage money from the free market.
That's right, and we want to make sure there is competition. And I think there's evidence that Telstra, it's their job to protect shareholders' value. And of course, they're going to hold on to that valuable asset they have, the last mile, the copper wire into people's houses, and they'll try to obstruct competitors getting access to that. So you can kind of imagine they're going to do it. If the government won't break up Telstra, then the next step is really to make sure that there is a free access to people's houses by something like fibre into the home.
And just to put this into perspective, Peter, it's a significant issue, isn't it? Because Australia is already well below a lot of the world in terms of our broadband capacity.
That's right. Akamai, who's a forward caching company globally, put out a report. They do it every year. And just 2 weeks ago, they ranked us as 50th in the world in terms of average speed of broadband. They put our average speed at just 2.6 megabits per second, which seems a bit low to me. The US is 16th, the UK is 21, even New Zealand is ahead of us at 42. Now, to be fair, a lot of our partners in Asia, such as Korea, are much more dense countries where people tend to live in large blocks of flats, and they can get fibre to the block of flats and then they can do it there. So we do have some problems, but we really should be more competitive with countries like America, and much of Europe beats us as well.
And just very briefly, Pete, we've got to go, but both parties now have outlined their broadband plans and their intention for the internet filter. Are there technology policies missing from the agendas?
Absolutely. I think we're missing the big visionary policies. We should be looking at net neutrality. We should be enforcing that internet service providers don't filter or shape our networks to basically force us to use one resource rather than another. Government 2.0, whatever happened to that? I know in Victoria there's been a push for that, but the Obama administration is all about basically giving access to the public for everything they deal with government with should be on the net. That really helps the elderly, the infirm. There's also open source. Government should try to use open source, and any software government writes should be made open source. And finally, I would really like to see electronic textbooks for school kids. My kids carry 20 kilos in their backpacks. We've now got fabulous ebook readers. All our textbooks should be in electronic format.
Here, I've got a bad back to prove it. Peter Marks, thanks very much. When I see you again in 2 weeks' time, we will know the future of our broadband network. It's 8:15 on Breakfast.